Welcome back to Scripture Horror. Tonight we're bringing 6 spine-tingling trucker terror tales from North Carolina. If you're new here, please subscribe to my channel and tap the bell so you never miss another chilling story. Now, let's get started. My name is Daniel Briggs, but most drivers on the road just call me Big Dan. I'm 54 years old, and for the last 30 of those years I've lived my life one highway line at a time. I've seen this country through the panoramic view of a windshield, from the scorching deserts of Arizona to the frozen plains of North Dakota, from the neon sprawl of Vegas to the lonely Appalachian passes where fog hangs like ghost breath. I've dealt with blowouts in the middle of nowhere, fought my rig through ice-slick switchbacks, and faced down thieves at 2 in the morning in gas stations that smelled like diesel and despair. I'm not the kind of man who scares easy. I believe in what I can touch, what I can haul, and what my rig's diagnostics say. Everything else, ghost stories, phantom lights, truck stop folklore, that's just CB chatter to keep the lonely guys awake. At least, that's what I used to believe. It was the last week of October, right when the nights start getting long and the air carries that hint of frost that tells you winter's moving in. I had a simple run, furniture from Charlotte to Knoxville. Nothing unusual. The route was familiar, US 70, cutting through the spine of the Blue Ridge. I'd done it so many times I could picture every curve, every downgrade, every diner sign that flickered half dead along the road. I left just before midnight to beat the morning rush. The sky was clear and black, full of more stars than I'd seen in months, the kind of night that feels older than the world itself. The road snaked between the mountains like a ribbon of dull silver. To my right, the valley fell away into a sea of shadow. To my left, the dark mass of the Pisgah forest rose like a sleeping giant. The only sound was the steady growl of my Cummins engine and the low hum of the tires chewing up the asphalt. I was sipping coffee that had gone lukewarm when I first saw it, a pinprick of light high on the ridge to my left. I thought it was a star at first, but it was too orange, too close. Then another appeared beside it, then a third. I figured maybe tower lights or campers. But these moved slowly at first, then with a kind of eerie grace. They drifted across the slope, pulsing like embers in a breeze. I eased off the gas, frowning. The lights were high up, way above any road, and the terrain there was sheer rock. They hovered for a second, then darted sideways with a speed that made no sense. One shot straight upward and vanished, then reappeared yards away. They looked alive. I rolled the window down. Cold air poured in, sharp with pine and damp earth. The night was utterly still, no wind, no sound but the engine. The lights kept dancing, sometimes aligning into a perfect row, sometimes scattering apart like startled birds. Their glow wasn't the sterile white of headlights or the blink of a tower beacon. It was warm, organic, like fire seen underwater amber that bled into pale blue, then back again. My hands tightened on the wheel. For a long minute I just watched, hypnotized. I reached for my CB. Breaker 19. This is Big Dan eastbound on 70. Anyone got a copy? Static answered. Thick, syrupy static that pressed against my words. I tried again. Breaker 19? Y'all seeing something strange over Brown Mountain? Through the hiss came a sound that didn't belong on any frequency I'd ever heard. Not a voice at first, more like wind through a tunnel. But then it shaped into words, or something like words. A chorus of voices chanting in a language I didn't recognize. It was low, melodic, mournful. The sound seeped into the cab like fog, and I could feel it through the floorboards, a vibration that matched the pulse of the lights outside. The temperature dropped fast. My breath fogged. The coffee in my cup holder frosted over at the edges. Every instinct screamed wrong. The lights had stopped moving. They hung in a half circle above the ridge, all pulsing together like a giant heartbeat. I swear I felt their rhythm inside my chest. The chant on the CB rose and fell, ancient and heavy with grief, like 1,000 voices crying for something lost centuries ago. The steering wheel was slick in my palms. I'd been through tornadoes, flash floods, armed robberies, but nothing had ever triggered the kind of bone-deep fear that was clawing up my spine right then. I slammed the window shut. The sudden thunk echoed like a gunshot. My breath came fast, fogging the glass. I threw the truck into gear and floored the accelerator. The Cummins roared, the trailer lurched, and the rig surged forward. I didn't care about the speed limit. I just wanted distance. But as I rounded the next bend, the lights moved too, gliding along the mountain beside me, keeping perfect pace. They weren't flying, not like aircraft. They flowed. That's the only word for it. Like a river of light spilling over the ridges, keeping formation no matter how tight the curves got. I tried the CB again, but now the chant had changed. It wasn't sorrowful anymore. It sounded urgent, warning me. I couldn't understand the words, but the tone was desperate, pleading. I yelled into the mic, "What do you want from me?" Static swallowed the question whole. Then my dash lights began to flicker. The speedometer needle dropped to 0. The GPS went black. Even the radio light died, leaving the cab in near total darkness. Only the headlights held steady, carving 2 weak tunnels through the fog that had begun to roll in out of nowhere. The engine coughed once, twice, then caught again with a growl. I kept my foot welded to the floor. For 10 straight minutes I drove blind curves at 70 miles an hour, trusting muscle memory and sheer luck. The lights stayed with me, high on the left, silent and watchful. Then, as I hit a sharp S-turn, the chant on the CB cut out mid-note. Silence crashed in so heavy it hurt my ears. The air went still. I risked a glance in the side mirror. The ridge was empty. The lights were gone. My dashboard flickered back on one bulb at a time. The GPS rebooted with its cheerful chime that nearly made me scream. Warm air blew from the vents again. Everything looked normal, like nothing had happened. Except my hands were trembling so hard I could barely grip the wheel. I kept driving until the glow of a 24-hour gas station appeared ahead. The lights felt like salvation. I pulled in hard, the hiss of the air brakes echoing through the empty lot. I stumbled out, knees shaking. The kid at the counter, a teenager with acne and a bored stare, watched me like I was a ghost myself. "You okay, sir?" he asked. I wiped sweat from my forehead, though the night was freezing. "Did you see them?" I asked. "The lights over the mountain." He shrugged. "You mean the Brown Mountain lights?" "Yeah, folks see them all the time. My granddad says it's the spirits of Cherokee warriors. Some scientist says it's swamp gas or headlights bouncing off clouds. He said it so casually, like it was nothing, like I hadn't just seen the impossible." I bought a fresh coffee, my hands still trembling as I handed him cash. Back in the cab, I sat for a long time, engine idling, trying to make sense of what happened. I picked up the CB again. "Breaker 19, this is Big Dan." "Anyone got a copy?" A voice crackled through immediately, calm and human. "Gotcha loud and clear, Big Dan." "What's your 20? The relief hit so hard it made my eyes sting. "Just east of Marion," I said. "All good. I didn't mention the lights. What could I say? But I'd been chased by something older than time? No one would believe it. I finished my run to Knoxville, delivered the load, signed the papers. But the world felt different afterward. Every dark stretch of highway looked deeper somehow. Every patch of static on the radio sounded almost like voices if you listened long enough. I took that route a dozen times after, but never again at night. I'll add hours to my drive just to avoid those mountains after sunset. Because I know what I saw. It wasn't swamp gas, and it sure as hell wasn't headlights. It was alive, ancient, and grieving. It was a warning sung by something caught between worlds. I don't know what it wanted, but I know it saw me, and for one long night I saw it too. Sometimes, when the road is empty and the sky turns that deep Appalachian black, I think about those lights. I imagine them still dancing over the ridge, waiting for another trucker to come rolling through the dead hour. And I wonder if that chant on the CB was really a warning or an invitation. Either way, I won't answer it again. Did you enjoy this story? Tell me in the comments, and don't forget to like this video. And now, let's begin our next terrifying tale. My name is Angela Morris. I'm 51 years old, and I've been driving rigs for almost 20 years now. It's not a common job for a woman my age, I know. I get the looks at truck stops, the surprise double takes over the CB, the harmless jokes about lady truckers, but none of that ever bothered me. I love the road. I love the independence, the solitude, the control of 70,000 pounds of steel and diesel humming beneath me as the miles roll by. Out here, I'm the captain of my own ship, charting my own course through every weather, every state, every sleepless night. I'm not the kind of person who scares easily. I've handled myself in rough situations, whiteout snow, sketchy rest areas, even one near jackknife on black ice. But what happened that night outside Asheville wasn't something you could handle. It was something you just had to survive. It was late October, one of those nights when the Appalachian foothills look like shadowed waves rolling under a storm. I was hauling a refrigerated load of pharmaceuticals, a high-priority shipment that had to reach Johnson City, Tennessee by morning. The pay was good, but the deadline was strict. I left Charlotte before sunset, planning to hit the Tennessee line well before dawn. But the weather had been turning sour all day, and by the time I hit Asheville, the sky had turned a bruised purple gray. The rain came down hard, so hard it felt alive. Torrents lashed across my windshield, blurring headlights into streaks of molten gold. My wipers were slapping at full speed, but they barely kept up. Every few seconds, lightning flashed and lit the mountains like bones under skin. My GPS, an old but reliable Garmin unit I called Betty, had started acting up hours earlier. The storm must have been messing with the satellite feed, because Betty's voice kept cutting out mid-sentence. Then, just as I was navigating that tangled mess of interchanges around Asheville, the screen flickered to black and came back with a new alert. "Rerouting due to road closure ahead," she said in her calm electronic tone. "Accident on I-26. Great. I didn't have time for a detour, but I didn't have a choice either." The new route Betty plotted looked like a nightmare, a string of twisting state highways, ending in some no-name county road cutting straight through the mountains. But the load was critical, and the hospital was expecting it before sunrise. I trusted Betty. I always had. The further I got from the interstate, the narrower and darker the roads became. The rain was relentless, hammering the roof of the cab like 1,000 fists. Water poured down the slopes, carrying mud and leaves across the pavement. The trees leaned heavy over the road, their branches scraping the trailer roof with long, screeching sounds that crawled up my spine. Every curve felt sharper, every downhill run steeper. My headlights sliced through the downpour, the beams bouncing off the slick blacktop. There was no one else out there, no taillights ahead, no headlights behind, just me and that storm that wouldn't end. Then Betty's map showed a thin blue line ahead, a small creek crossing. But when I rounded the bend, my high beams swept across something that shouldn't have been there. It wasn't a modern bridge of concrete and steel. It was old, built from dark, rain-slick stone. A low arch, moss growing along its sides, and a faint mist rising from the creek below. It looked ancient, like something left over from another century. It wasn't marked on my GPS at all. The blue line on Betty's screen showed the road continuing straight with no bridge indicated. I slowed the rig, uneasy. The bridge looked sturdy enough, but there was something wrong about it. It seemed too narrow, too small for a semi. But the rain was so heavy, backing up or finding another route was impossible. I told myself it was fine, just an old, unlisted bridge. I eased forward. The instant my front tires hit the stone surface, the truck changed. The engine, a perfectly tuned Detroit DD-15, coughed once, then sputtered. The dashboard lights flickered like dying candles. The radio dissolved into static. Every hair on my arm stood on end. I kept my foot on the accelerator, trying to coax her forward, but it felt like the bridge itself was pulling energy from the rig. The headlights dimmed to a faint yellow glow. The gauges dropped to 0. The bridge couldn't have been more than 40 feet long, but crossing it felt endless. The rain was deafening, pounding against the windshield in sheets. Then I heard something else, a sound cutting through the storm and the static. A woman. She was crying. It wasn't coming from the radio. It was outside. The sobbing was soft at first, almost lost in the rain. But then it grew louder, heartbroken, gasping, full of pain. It sounded like it was coming from right beside my cab window. I turned my head slowly, pulse hammering. There was nothing out there. No person, no shape, no reflection. Just swirling rain and darkness. But the crying continued, moving from one side of the cab to the other, sometimes closer, sometimes distant, like she was circling me. The sound was so full of sorrow, it made my chest ache. My knuckles were white on the wheel. Every instinct screamed to floor it, but the truck was barely crawling. The engine coughed and sputtered, the power draining with every foot. I whispered out loud, "Come on, baby, just a little more." Finally, the back wheels rolled off the stone onto asphalt, and everything went dead. The engine cut out completely. The headlights went black. The dashboard died. Even the wipers froze mid-swipe. The only sound was the rain on the roof, and that woman's weeping outside my window. I sat frozen, afraid to move, afraid to look. I reached for my phone, no signal. I tried the CB, but it was silent. No static, no hiss. Just dead air. I could feel the cold through the cab walls, deeper than any normal chill. It wasn't the kind that makes you shiver. It was the kind that feels alive, crawling into your bones. The crying shifted again, closer now, right outside the driver's door. I locked it instinctively, though I knew a lock wouldn't help against whatever that was. I held my breath, gripping the wheel so tight my hands hurt. Minutes passed, or maybe seconds, I couldn't tell. I squeezed my eyes shut, whispering for the truck to start, for the crying to stop, for the sun to rise. Then, as if some unseen switch flipped, everything came roaring back at once. The engine jumped to life. The headlights flared on. The dashboard lit up. The wipers screeched back into motion. The radio picked up exactly where it had left off, the country singer's voice cutting through the static mid-chorus. And the crying was gone. I slammed the truck into gear and hit the accelerator. The tires spun for a second, throwing up water, then caught traction. I sped down that narrow mountain road like the devil himself was chasing me. My heart was pounding, but I couldn't stop. I just needed to get as far away as possible. After maybe a quarter mile, curiosity, or maybe madness, made me look in the rearview mirror. I expected to see the dark stone bridge fading in the rain. But there was nothing. No bridge. No creek. Just a straight stretch of wet asphalt vanishing into the trees. I blinked, leaned forward, looked again. Still nothing. The road behind me was seamless. A wave of dizziness hit me. I felt sick, disoriented, like gravity itself had twisted. Had I imagined the bridge? Was I so tired I hallucinated the whole thing? But I could still feel the faint vibration in my hands from when the truck had sputtered, still hear the echo of that crying in my ears. You can't imagine a sound like that. Not that kind of grief. I drove until I saw highway signs again, until the rain eased and the sky turned pale gray with dawn. When I finally rolled into Johnson City, I was only a few minutes behind schedule. The hospital staff signed the delivery slip without a second glance. To them, I was just another driver, another load. Nobody noticed how pale I was, or how my hands trembled when I passed over the paperwork. After I slept a few hours at the truck stop, I tried to find that road again. I checked maps, online directories, even satellite images. Nothing matched. No county road connecting Asheville to Johnson City that cut across a creek like that. I asked a few other drivers at the diner. Most shrugged, but one old-timer, gray beard, cigarette hanging from his lip, gave me a long look. "You said it was a stone bridge?" he asked. "Out near the foothills?" I nodded. He exhaled smoke slowly. "You don't mess with that road, sweetheart. Locals call it Helen's Crossing. Ain't on any map. Shows up only in bad weather. They say a woman named Helen lost her kid in a fire, jumped from the bridge when she couldn't live with it. Folks say she still cries for him when it rains." He looked at me with pity. "If you saw that bridge, you were meant to. She finds the lost ones." I wanted to laugh it off, but I couldn't. His words hit too close. Lost ones. Maybe he was right. Maybe that's what the bridge was. A snare for anyone running out of hope, anyone alone in the dark. I finished my coffee, thanked him, and left without another word. That night, parked at a rest area near Knoxville, I sat behind the wheel long after the world went quiet. The rain started again, soft at first, then steady. Every drop against the windshield made me flinch. I turned off the radio. I just listened. No crying. No static. No bridge. But every time lightning flashed, for a split second, I swore I could see the reflection of wet stone in the glass. I still drive long haul. Still love the open road, the hum of the tires, the endless horizon, but now there's a new kind of respect mixed in with the love. A fear, quiet but constant. Because I've learned something that night taught me well. Some roads don't appear on maps. Some bridges aren't built from stone and mortar. They're built from grief, from loss, from the echoes of people who never found their way home. And if you ever find yourself on one alone, lost, desperate to make it through the storm, whatever you do, don't stop. Because some bridges aren't meant to be crossed twice. My name is Robert Caldwell. I'm 52 years old, and I've been driving a big rig since I was 19. In this line of work, you develop a set of rules. You live by them, or you don't last long. Rule number 1, trust your gut. Rule number 2, keep your fuel tank over a quarter full. Rule number 3, and the oldest rule in the book, never, ever pick up a hitchhiker. That rule's been passed from driver to driver since the first diesel engine hit the highway. You never know who they are, what they're running from, or what they're capable of. For 33 years, I stuck to that rule. Not once did I stop for someone on the shoulder, but one long, fog-choked night on I-85, I broke it. And I've been paying for it ever since. It was a simple run hauling a trailer full of textiles from Atlanta up to Greensboro. I've been on the road since sunrise, the kind of day that bleeds together until it's just one endless line of asphalt. By the time the clock hit 2 a.m., fatigue was sitting heavy on my eyelids. The highway stretched ahead like a gray ribbon swallowed by fog. The air was thick, wet, and metallic, and my wipers worked overtime just to keep a glimpse of the white lane markers in view. My world had shrunk to the bubble of my headlights, everything beyond it swallowed by swirling mist. It was the kind of night that eats sound. The drone of the engine, the rhythmic thump of the tires, the hiss of the air brakes, all of it blended into a hypnotic hum. I fought sleep with bad coffee and sunflower seeds, flicking shells into an empty Gatorade bottle, trying to stay alert. Somewhere around mile marker 217, I saw him. At first, it was just a shape, a vague silhouette on the shoulder of the interstate. A trick of the fog, I thought. But as I drew closer, the shape solidified into a man. Young, maybe early 20s. Dark, shaggy hair plastered to his forehead. Jeans and a thin gray jacket, way too light for the cold. He was soaked, though the rain had stopped hours ago. He stood completely still, thumb half raised, a statue carved out of misery. Every instinct in me said, keep driving. Rule number 3, never stop. But then I caught another look at his face as the headlights swept past. He wasn't menacing, just lost. Scared. Maybe his car had broken down. Maybe he'd been walking for miles. My conscience whispered excuses. He's just a kid, it's freezing, no one else will see him in this fog. So against 33 years of hard-earned wisdom, I slowed the rig. The air brakes hissed, the trailer shuddered, and I pulled onto the shoulder about 50 feet ahead of him. I watched through my side mirror as he started walking toward the cab, not running, just moving slow and steady, like every step took effort. I leaned across the passenger seat and popped the door open. "Get in," I called out. "It's too damn cold to be out there." He climbed the metal steps, boots clanging against steel, and slid into the seat without a word. He pulled the heavy door shut with a thud that seemed too loud for the quiet cab. The first thing I noticed was the temperature. The moment he got in, the warmth from my heater vanished. The cab filled with a biting, unnatural cold. My breath fogged the air, and the windows frosted at the edges. The second thing I noticed was the smell-damp earth, river mud, and decaying leaves. It wasn't unpleasant exactly, just wrong. Like the air in a cave that hasn't been opened in years. He sat rigid, hands folded in his lap, staring straight ahead. His skin was pale, almost translucent in the glow of the dashboard lights. He didn't shiver. He didn't move. "Where you headed?" I asked, easing back onto the highway. No answer. He didn't even glance my way. Just kept his eyes locked on the fog swallowing the road ahead. "Cat got your tongue?" I tried to joke, but my voice sounded strange, too loud in the heavy silence. He didn't blink, didn't breathe, as far as I could tell. "Look, I can take you as far as the next truck stop," I said. "Maybe grab you a coffee, get you warm." That's when he finally moved. Slowly, deliberately, he raised one hand and pointed straight ahead. Just one long, pale finger, stiff and precise. He didn't speak, didn't look at me. Just kept pointing down the endless, fog-shrouded highway. The gesture sent a chill through me deeper than the cold ever could. Something in that motion felt final, like an order from someone who had no right to give one. My gut screamed at me to stop, to pull over, throw open the door, and tell him to get out. But I didn't. I just kept driving. The silence pressed in like a weight. The road stretched on, featureless and empty. No other headlights, no taillights, no sound but the engine. I risked a glance at the dashboard clock. 15 minutes had passed. It felt like an hour. My eyelids drooped, but not from exhaustion. It was something else, a heaviness settling over me, draining my energy. The air in the cab felt thick, like breathing underwater. Then, all at once, I couldn't take it anymore. "All right, buddy," I said, forcing my voice steady. "You either tell me where you're going, or I'm dropping you at the next exit." No exceptions. I turned to face him and froze. The passenger seat was empty. I blinked, certain I was seeing things. He had been sitting there seconds ago. The door was still shut. I hadn't heard it open. The dome light hadn't flickered on. He was just gone. My pulse pounded in my throat. I scanned the cab, the sleeper berth behind me. Nothing. My breath came fast and shallow. The cold was fading now, replaced by a suffocating warmth as the heater fought back. The silence had broken too, the engine hum returning to normal, familiar, and safe. Then I saw it. On the passenger seat where he'd been sitting was a small, dark, wet patch, a puddle spreading across the vinyl. I stared, frozen, as it began to shrink. The moisture on the floor mat evaporated, steam curling into the air before disappearing entirely. In less than 30 seconds, the seat was bone dry. I jerked the wheel toward the shoulder, the rig lurching as the tires hit gravel. I sat there, engine idling, hands trembling so bad I could barely shift gears. The fog pressed against the windshield like a living thing. Finally, I climbed down and circled the truck, flashlight beam cutting through the mist. The highway was silent, empty. No footprints, no sign anyone had ever been there. When I climbed back in, I sat for a long time staring at the empty passenger seat, the ghost of that cold still clinging to my bones. I didn't start driving again for almost an hour. I finished the route that night, but I don't remember a single mile of it. My mind replayed every second over and over, the way he'd pointed, the deadness in his eyes, the way he'd simply vanished. When I delivered the load in Greensboro, the dock worker told me I looked like hell. I didn't answer. I couldn't. I went straight to a motel and sat in the dark till sunrise, the sound of traffic outside making me flinch. I never told the full story to another driver. I've hinted at it over coffee at truck stops, laughed it off when the subject of phantom hitchhikers came up. But deep down, I know what I saw. I picked up a ghost. They call it folklore, highway legend, the story truckers tell rookies to keep them alert. But it happened to me. And ever since that night, I haven't been the same. I don't drive after dark anymore, not if I can help it. Fog gives me panic attacks I can't explain. The moment visibility drops, my hands start to shake. Sometimes, when I'm alone on a long stretch of road, I'll feel that sudden cold again. Sharp, immediate, unnatural. I'll glance at the passenger seat and swear I see a shadow there. Just a dark patch in my peripheral vision, nothing solid. But my heart stops every time. It's always gone when I look. Always. But I still look. I can't not. Once, about a year after it happened, I thought I'd finally moved on. I was running a daylight route through South Carolina, clear skies, perfect weather. Around noon, I stopped for lunch at a small diner off exit 42. When I came back out to the lot, the fog had rolled in from nowhere. Just a thin layer at first, then thick enough to swallow the far end of my trailer. And when I climbed into the cab, the air inside was freezing. I sat there, staring at the passenger seat. It was dry. Empty, but the smell damp earth, river mud, decay filled the space again. I gripped the steering wheel till my knuckles went white. The fog outside thickened until the diner lights disappeared completely. Then, faintly through the mist, I heard it. A voice, quiet, almost a whisper. My name, Robert. I spun around, but there was no one. Just the creak of the truck settling. I slammed the door, started the engine, and peeled out of that lot so fast I nearly jackknifed the trailer. I drove straight through to Charleston and parked under direct sunlight. I stayed in that cab the rest of the day, engine running, windows down, shaking like a rookie on his first haul. That was the last time I ever ignored my gut. Now, when new drivers ask me for advice, I tell them the same 3 rules I've always lived by. Trust your gut. Keep your tank full. And never, no matter how lost, how innocent, or how desperate they look, never pick up a hitchhiker. Because sometimes the road doesn't just carry the living. Sometimes it remembers the dead. And some passengers aren't looking for a ride. They're looking for company. If this story gave you chills, hit that like button, drop a comment below, and tell me where you're listening from. Another horrifying story is waiting. Let's keep rolling down this dark highway together. My name is Melissa Turner, and I'm what they call a specialized hauler. I don't drive the big 18-wheelers. I operate a flatbed rig, usually hauling oversized loads, construction equipment, prefabricated home sections, things that require special permits and escort vehicles. It's a tough job, but it pays well, and it takes me through some of the most remote and beautiful places in the country. One of those places is the Blue Ridge Parkway, and it was there, on what should have been a calm, scenic drive, that I heard a sound that will haunt me for the rest of my life. Most commercial traffic isn't even allowed on the parkway. It's a national park road, built for tourists, not truckers. But my company had pulled some strings, secured a rare permit. We were transporting a custom log cabin frame to a wealthy client's property that bordered the park. The only access point was a short, narrow stretch of the parkway. We had to move the load late in the afternoon, after tourist traffic died down. It was early November. The air was crisp, the last of the autumn leaves clinging to the trees like embers in fading light. The mountains glowed gold and red beneath a sky so blue it almost hurt to look at. The road curved and twisted through the ridges, following every contour of the land. My escort vehicle, a white pickup with amber lights, was half a mile ahead, making sure the road was clear. We crawled forward at 30 miles an hour, the log frame secured behind me, chains humming, the engine steady. As the sun began to dip behind the western ridge, the world softened into what photographers call the golden hour. The light turned honey-colored. The wind stilled. Even the birds went quiet. It was peaceful, the kind of peace that makes you forget the world outside the mountains. Then I heard it. At first it was faint, so faint I thought it was just the whine of my tires on the pavement. But then it rose, cutting through the hum of the engine like a knife. A scream. A woman's scream. It wasn't the kind of scream you hear in movies. This was raw, piercing, full of agony. It echoed off the ridges, coming from everywhere and nowhere at once, from the woods to my right, from the valley to my left, from the air itself. It was the sound of someone being torn apart by fear. I slammed on the brakes. The rig shuddered to a stop, chains clanking, steel creaking. The log frame behind me shifted, groaning like it was alive. Ahead of me, the escort driver hit his brakes too, tires screeching. His voice crackled over the radio. "Melissa? You see a deer?" The scream stopped, just gone. The silence that followed was thick and wrong. The forest that had looked golden moments before now felt heavy, watchful. "Did you hear that?" I asked, gripping the mic. "Hear what?" "I didn't hear anything but your brakes." "There was a scream," I said. "A woman screaming." "It sounded bad." He paused. "Didn't hear a thing, Mel." "Maybe it was a bobcat. They can sound like a woman screaming sometimes." I'd heard bobcats before. That wasn't one. This was human. This was real. "No," I said. "We need to call it in. Someone's in trouble." He hesitated, but I didn't. I radioed it in myself. We gave the park rangers our location, mile marker, direction, everything. I sat in my cab, engine idling, staring into the woods. The sun was gone now, the shadows long and deep, swallowing the trees whole. It didn't take long for the rangers to arrive. 2 SUVs pulled up, lights flashing quietly in the dusk. A sheriff's deputy showed up not long after. They took my statement politely, but I could see it in their faces. They didn't believe me. A tired smile, a knowing nod. A truck driver spooked by the mountains. Still, they searched. Flashlights cut through the trees, beams crossing over the ravine, down through the brush. They covered both sides of the road, even climbed a bit of the slope. For an hour they combed that forest. When they came back, they were empty-handed. "Ma'am," the lead ranger said gently, "we've searched the whole area." "There's no one out there. It's probably a fox." Their calls echo strangely up here. I wanted to argue, to make him understand what I'd heard, but what could I say? I was the only one who heard it. I nodded and let them go. We finished the delivery in silence. The forest felt different now, like it was listening. That scream replayed in my head all night long. A few weeks later, I was sitting in a small diner outside Asheville. The kind of place where the coffee's strong and the people know your business before you speak. The waitress was an older woman with silver hair pulled into a bun. We got to talking, and I told her about what happened. When I mentioned the scream, her face drained of color. "What mile marker were you near?" she asked quietly. I told her. She looked at me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "You heard her," she said. Not a question. A statement. She told me about Sarah Jane Miller, a young woman who vanished on that very stretch of road more than 40 years ago. She and her boyfriend had been driving the parkway at night. They argued. She got out to cool off, walked into the woods. He drove off, planning to circle back. By the time he returned, she was gone. They searched for weeks. Police, volunteers, rangers. They never found her. Not a footprint, not a scrap of clothing. Just gone. "They say you can still hear her sometimes," the waitress whispered. "Especially around dusk, screaming for help that never came." Her words crawled under my skin and stayed there. That night, I lay awake in my truck cab, replaying the sound in my head. I thought it was fear I heard, but what if it was something worse? What if it was the last echo of someone's soul, trapped forever in that mountain pass? Sleep didn't come easy after that. Every sound in the night made me jump. The hiss of the air brakes, a whistle of wind through the mirrors. I started avoiding the quiet routes, the scenic roads. I stuck to interstates and truck stops, where the noise drowned everything out. But the memory clung to me. That scream never faded. Almost a year later, I got another job in North Carolina. A hospital delivery in Asheville. The route ran close to the parkway, and when I saw those familiar ridges rising blue and hazy in the distance, my stomach turned. I told myself I was done being afraid. After I finished the drop, I had a day off. And against my better judgment, I decided to go back. I rented a small car, just a little tourist thing, and told myself I was going to drive that stretch of road again. In daylight. No fog, no isolation, no fear. Just me and the mountains. The parkway was beautiful that day. The sun high, sky clear, tourists everywhere. Families taking pictures, cyclists coasting past. I kept the windows down, radio low, pretending it was just another drive. Slowly, the tension eased. Maybe it really had been an animal. Maybe the waitress had just been superstitious. Then I saw the mile marker. The one burned into my memory. I pulled over at the small overlook just before the curve. In the bright sun, it looked ordinary. Trees rustling, the valley spilling wide and green. Nothing ominous. I got out of the car and walked to the edge of the overlook. That's when I saw it. A small bronze plaque set into a rock, half hidden by moss. It wasn't an official marker. It looked handmade, weathered. I leaned closer to read it. In loving memory of Sarah Jane Miller, lost but not forgotten. 1956, 1979. My breath caught in my throat. The year matched. The name matched. The story was real. This was her spot. This was where she vanished. The sun was still bright. The air was warm, but the world around me seemed to tilt, like I'd stepped into a shadow no one else could see. I stared at that plaque until my eyes blurred. A part of me expected to hear it again, that scream ripping through the air. But the woods stayed silent. Too silent. I left quickly, my hand shaking on the steering wheel. The rest of the drive was a blur. But that plaque, those words burned into my memory. Sarah Jane Miller. She wasn't just a ghost story. She had been real. I never went back to the parkway after that. I didn't need to. That place had taken something from me, a piece of peace I'll never get back. Now, when I talk to new drivers, especially young women, I tell them to be careful on the lonely roads. I don't tell them the whole story. They'd think I was crazy. But I tell them this: Trust your instincts. Don't dismiss the sound that makes your skin crawl. Because this world is full of beautiful places that hide ugly secrets. And sometimes, if you're in the wrong place at the wrong time, you might just hear them. The echoes of those who were lost but never found. The screams of the forgotten. And once you hear them, you can never unhear them. My name is Henry Walker. I'm 53 years old, and I've been running the same routes through the coastal plains of North Carolina for almost 30 years. I haul timber mostly, taking it from the inland forests out toward the port in Wilmington. I know every bend of those roads like the back of my hand, where the asphalt buckles in summer, where the deer come out at dusk, and which bridges flood first when the Cape Fear overflows. It's a quiet life, steady work, and for the most part I've liked it that way. You spend enough nights alone on those dark Carolina highways, you start thinking you've seen everything the road can throw at you. But I hadn't, not even close. It was a late August night, thick and heavy with humidity, the kind where the air sticks to your skin and the crickets never shut up. I was heading south on US 17, hauling a full trailer of pine logs, the load chained down and covered in road dust. The windows were rolled halfway down, letting the smell of the swamp roll in. A mix of damp earth, salt, and decay that's weirdly comforting when you've known it long enough. My headlights cut a tunnel through the darkness, the occasional farmhouse light winking miles away across the flat expanse of marsh. I was an hour out from the port, already tasting the cold beer waiting for me once I dropped the load. Everything was perfectly ordinary, until it wasn't. The first thing that caught my eye was the glow in my rearview mirror. Headlights, one pair, then another behind it. They were coming up fast, too fast. I was running steady at 60, and whoever was behind me was closing the gap like I was standing still. Out here, at this hour, you don't see much traffic. My hand drifted toward the CB, ready to call it in if someone was driving reckless. But as those lights neared, I realized it wasn't just one vehicle. It was a whole line. A convoy. My first thought was military. We see them sometimes, convoys moving between bases. It wasn't common, but not impossible. I eased off the accelerator a little, giving them room to pass. The first truck pulled up beside me, and in the space of a single heartbeat, my world turned upside down. It wasn't a modern transport, not a Humvee, not even a modern semi. The thing looked like it had rolled straight out of a World War II movie, a big, olive-drab deuce and a half with round headlights and a canvas-covered back. It gleamed under my lights, clean, pristine, not a spot of rust, which was impossible for something that old out here in the salt air. I was about to key my mic, maybe make a joke about a parade coming through, when I realized something was wrong. Terribly wrong. There was no sound. My diesel engine was roaring, the tires humming on the asphalt, the air rushing past the cab, but the truck beside me was completely silent. No engine growl, no rumble, not even the faint whine of gears. It moved like a ghost through water, floating just ahead of me. My mouth went dry. I looked through the passenger window and saw the driver. He was pale, almost gray under the moonlight, his face thin and hollow, eyes sunken like two black pits. He wore an old-style soldier's helmet and uniform, the kind you only see in museums now. He didn't look at me. His hands gripped the wheel, stiff, locked in place, his gaze fixed dead ahead. In the back of the truck, under the canvas, I saw movement shapes sitting upright on benches, the outlines of helmets and shoulders. Soldiers. Row after row of them, sitting perfectly still, their faces lost in shadow. My stomach turned over. The air inside my cab grew cold, and suddenly the chorus of crickets and frogs outside stopped. Dead silence, like the whole world was holding its breath. Another truck passed me, identical. Then another, and another. A convoy of ghostly transports gliding past in the humid Carolina dark. My headlights reflected off their polished sides, but the light seemed to go through them somehow, dimmer, thinner, like it was shining through fog. None of the drivers looked at me. All of them wore the same hollow expression, the same lifeless focus, driving toward some unseen destination. I tried the radio. Breaker 19, anyone got eyes on this convoy near mile marker 92? Static. Harsh, ripping static that sounded like cloth tearing. I tried again, nothing but that same violent hiss. Sweat rolled down my neck even though the air felt suddenly icy. The trucks kept coming, maybe a dozen of them, each one perfectly spaced, rolling silent through the night. When the last truck drew even with me, I noticed the stenciled letters on its tailgate. White paint. Camp Lejeune. And below that, a date, 1944. My breath caught in my throat. I blinked, and the taillights ahead started to fade, not turn off, not shrink into the distance, but literally fade, dissolving into the humid air like mist under headlights. Within seconds, the road was empty again. The night sounds rushed back all at once. The crickets, the frogs, the hum of distant power lines. I slammed my rig onto the shoulder and just sat there, hands shaking on the wheel. My headlights shone on nothing but blacktop and trees. No tire marks, no convoy. Just me. The clock on my dash read 2:37 a.m., but it felt like time itself had paused. I don't know how long I sat there before forcing myself to keep driving. I dropped the load at the port without a word, skipped the beer, and spent the rest of the night sitting in a motel room staring at the wall. I still take that route sometimes, but whenever I see headlights in my mirror, I pray they make a sound. Because out there on those old Carolina roads, the past doesn't stay buried. Sometimes it rides right beside you. Did you enjoy that story? Tell me in the comments. And don't forget to like this video. And now, let's begin our next terrifying tale. My name is Vanessa Price. I'm 36, an independent hauler based out of Raleigh. I own my rig, pick my own contracts, and make my own schedule. Freedom comes at a price, though. When things go wrong out there, I don't have a company dispatcher or a backup team. It's just me and the road. I've always prided myself on my sense of direction, old school maps, compass, and instinct. GPS is just a safety net. But that pride almost killed me one night deep in the Uwharrie National Forest. I'd picked up a run delivering specialized mining equipment to a quarry on the far side of the forest. The shortcut through the back roads was supposed to save me nearly 4 hours compared to the interstate. I'd driven it before during daylight, no problem. But delays at pickup pushed my departure later than expected, and by the time I hit the forest roads, it was past midnight. The world outside my windshield was blacker than ink, the trees closing in so tight it felt like the night itself had weight. My headlights cut narrow tunnels through the dark, glinting off mist and pine needles. I kept one hand on the wheel, the other tracing my route on a paper map spread across the passenger seat. Then I saw the detour sign. A hand-painted wooden board nailed to a post, lit by a single sputtering flare at its base. Bridge out. D2R. My GPS showed the main road ahead as clear. My map didn't list any alternate route at all. I should have turned around right there. But the sign looked official enough, and I was already behind schedule. Against every gut instinct screaming at me, I took the right turn. The detour road was narrow and unpaved, gravel crunching beneath the tires, trees arching overhead so thick they blotted out the moon. My rig jolted and swayed, the trailer groaning with each bump. I kept my eyes forward, scanning for the next marker. After 15 minutes, I passed an old barn, half collapsed, roof sagging, a twisted oak tree beside it with branches like claws reaching for the sky. It was creepy, sure, but harmless. I mentally marked it as a landmark. Another 20 minutes went by. The road twisted, climbed, and dipped, but I figured I was still heading roughly in the right direction. Then my headlights swept across something that made my stomach drop. The same barn. Same oak tree, same sagging roof, same missing planks glinting silver under the moon. Impossible. I must have made a loop somehow, maybe a hidden fork I missed. I pushed on. 30 minutes later, I saw it again. No question now. It was the exact same barn. Every splinter, every shadow was identical. The air felt thick, heavy. Even the forest sounds had stopped. No crickets, no frogs. Just silence and the low hum of my idling engine. My GPS was no help. The map was glitching, the area around my icon flickering like static. I threw the rig into reverse, intending to backtrack, but when I looked in my mirrors, the road behind me was gone, not obscured, gone. Where the road had been, there was now a solid wall of trees. I froze. My pulse pounded in my ears. The only direction left was forward. I drove on, jaw clenched so tight it hurt. And then, for the 4th time, the barn appeared. But this time, there was a dim light glowing in one of the windows. A flicker, like a lantern or candle. I gripped the wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. Someone, or something, knew I was out here. Fifth loop. The light was brighter now. The big barn door stood slightly ajar, a sickly yellow glow spilling onto the dirt road. The smell hit me next. Wet wood, something faintly metallic underneath. I wanted to floor it, but the road was rough, full of ruts that could flip my trailer. I drove past as steadily as I could, every nerve screaming not to look at the doorway. I failed. For just an instant, I thought I saw movement inside, a shadow shifting against the light. Something tall. Sixth loop. My hands were shaking. I was crying without realizing it, muttering to myself just to hear a human voice. When the barn came into view again, the door was wide open, and standing in the threshold was a figure. Human-shaped, impossibly still. I couldn't make out features, just a silhouette framed by that sick, flickering glow. It was waiting for me. That broke me. I wasn't going to let whatever it was take me. I slammed the accelerator to the floor. As I roared past the barn, I spotted a weak spot in the tree line ahead, a gap, a rickety fence barely visible through the brush. It was the only break in the endless loop. Without thinking, I yanked the wheel hard left. The truck exploded through the fence, splintering wood, tearing through underbrush. The trailer bucked, and the alarms on my dash screamed. I didn't care. Branches clawed at the windshield, and I kept pushing, headlights bouncing wildly until, with a bone-jarring crash, my front tires hit pavement. A real road. Smooth, black asphalt stretching into the distance. I slammed on the brakes, breathing in ragged gasps. Behind me, nothing. Just the dark wall of the Uwharrie forest. No field. No broken fence. No barn. It was as if I'd driven straight out of another world. I stayed there a long time, shaking, headlights cutting through the mist. Eventually, I found a 24-hour gas station miles down the road. The clerk stared at me like I'd crawled out of a grave. Maybe I had. I never told the company the truth. Said it was a GPS malfunction and an electrical issue. They docked my pay but didn't ask questions. I don't take shortcuts anymore. I stay on the main highways, under bright lights, surrounded by other drivers. Because now I know, somewhere out there, hidden between the lines of our maps, there are roads that don't belong to this world. Roads that trap you. Roads that remember you. And if you're unlucky enough to take one, you might never come back. No 6 Harold Jameson had been driving 18-wheelers through the winding mountain roads of West Virginia for 15 years, and in all that time he believed he'd seen everything the Appalachian highways could throw at a man. Black ice that could send a fully loaded rig sliding sideways into a ravine. Sudden rock slides that crashed from the cliffs without warning. Fog so thick it swallowed the world whole, until the yellow center line became the only thread between life and oblivion. Harold had survived all of it with the steady nerves and sharp instincts that separated professionals from the reckless warriors who pushed luck too far. But on an October night in 2017, guiding his Peterbilt through dense mountain fog near Beckley, he met something that shattered his understanding of what was possible on America's highways. The weather report had warned of heavy fog rolling through the passes, but Harold was running behind schedule with a time-sensitive load of medical equipment bound for a hospital in Charleston. His dispatcher had made it clear that delays weren't acceptable. Harold prided himself on 15 years without missing a delivery, and he wasn't about to start now. The fog thickened just after sunset, turning the familiar mountain landscape into a void of shifting gray. The edges of the road vanished into nothing, and visibility dropped to barely 30 feet. He slowed to a cautious 30 miles an hour and switched on every light his rig had, the Peterbilt becoming a moving constellation of amber, red, and white slicing through the mist. For the first hour, everything felt routine. The engine's hum was steady, the heaters droned familiar, the CB alive with voices of other drivers sharing fog warnings up ahead. Harold added his own reports, keeping part of that invisible brotherhood alive, the network that kept men breathing on nights like this. Despite the tension of driving blind through cloud-soaked darkness, he felt in control. He knew every curve of these roads like the lines on his palm. Then, somewhere between Lewisburg and Beckley, the comfort cracked. He noticed movement out the corner of his eye, a shape pacing him through the trees. At first he thought it was fog twisting in the beams or shadows cast by his own lights against the guardrail. But the shape returned, darker this time, keeping a perfect 40-foot distance from the highway. He leaned forward, squinting into the mist. Nothing definite. Just motion, smooth and deliberate, moving in rhythm with his 30-mile-per-hour crawl. Wildlife wasn't unusual in the Appalachians. Deer, black bears, the occasional wandering elk. They either bolted or froze when they saw a truck. None of them kept pace. None of them mirrored your speed, stride for stride, as if measuring you. Harold felt his chest tighten. He tried to shake it off, fatigue, imagination, too many hours without real rest. But it didn't fade. Whatever was in those trees was still there. When the fob shifted briefly on a turn wrapping around the ridge, his headlights parted the mist long enough for him to see. The sight locked his hands on the wheel. A figure. Tall. Wrong. It moved on two legs, gliding effortlessly between the trees. 9 feet tall, maybe more. Limbs too long, proportions stretched like shadows at sunset. The body had no clear edges, just darkness wrapped in mist, each stride silent and fluid. It covered uneven ground as if gravity didn't matter. Harold's rational mind clawed for sense. No animal fit that shape. No man could move like that. His instinct screamed to call it in over the CB, but what would he even say? A walking shadow the size of a grizzly? He imagined the laughter, the disbelief, the whispers that he'd lost it. The fog swallowed the forest again, thicker now, visibility shrinking to 15 feet. Harold dropped speed to 20. The figure adjusted instantly, still pacing. The forest seemed to yield to it, branches bending, underbrush swaying aside as it passed. It didn't push through. It glided, as if the mountain made space for it. Then came the sound, a heavy thud on the roof of his cab. Harold's reflexes jerked the wheel. The trailer swayed, nearly clipping the guardrail. Another thud, then a metallic scrape across the roof. His stomach lurched. Something was on top of the truck. The CB exploded in static, then died completely. Dashboard lights flickered, the radio cutting in and out. The hum of the engine faltered before catching again. A chill crawled through his spine. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate, moving from the trailer toward the cab, each impact heavy enough to make the truck rock. The metal above him groaned. Harold's hands clamped the wheel so tight his knuckles turned white. Then came a new sound, a low humming vibration that pulsed through the cabin, deep enough to rattle his teeth. It wasn't mechanical. It wasn't human. It was a sound that seemed to come from inside his bones. The thing reached the top of the cab, scratching. Long, sharp drags across the windshield. Harold flinched as thin white lines appeared on the glass. The sound was unbearable, like claws on glass mixed with static feedback, too high to block out. The rhythm wasn't random. It was deliberate, as if whatever was out there wanted him to know it was writing on the glass. He floored the accelerator. The Peterbilt roared, tires whining on the slick pavement. The sudden burst of speed made the creature furious. The scraping turned frantic. Branches snapped above the cab. Chunks of bark and pine needles rained down the windshield. The humming deepened into a guttural growl that made the mirrors shake. Through the swirling fog ahead, light appeared, a faint yellow glow. A truck stop, less than a mile. Civilization, witnesses. Harold leaned on the horn, the blare echoing through the mountains. Instantly, the roof went silent. No scraping, no vibration, no growl. The weight above vanished, and the truck steadied. He didn't ease off the pedal until the floodlights of the truck stop swallowed him whole. He pulled in under the brightest lamps, parking across 2 spaces without caring. His hands refused to let go of the wheel. His heart hammered so violently it hurt. Around him the world looked normal. Diesel engines idling, men laughing near the diner, the smell of frying food drifting through the cold air. Normal. Ordinary. But Harold couldn't move. Couldn't process what had happened in the fog. When he finally climbed down, the night air hit him like a slap. He walked around the truck with shaking hands, his flashlight beam trembling across the metal. The scratches on the windshield glinted back at him, 5 perfect parallel lines running nearly edge to edge. the kind no branch could make. The roof of the cab bore long gouges where paint and metal had been torn away, raw steel exposed like wounds. But the worst part was what he found on top of the trailer: footprints. Large, human-shaped, but distorted. The toes were long, narrow, ending in deep punctures where claws had dug through the metal skin of the trailer. The impressions weren't smudged or partial. They were crisp, pressed hard enough to bend the aluminum. Harold backed away, light shaking wildly. His mind screamed to make sense of it. Prank, animal, mechanical failure, anything but none fit. He snapped photos with his phone, frame after frame, hands trembling. Proof. Something tangible to hold on to when morning came. He never filed a report. He didn't even tell the dispatcher. What could he say that wouldn't end his career? So he kept quiet. For a while. A week later, at a rest area outside Charleston, he broke his silence to another long hauler he trusted. The man listened without interrupting. When Harold finished, the driver just stared, pale under the fluorescent lights, then said quietly, "You seen it too." That night, Harold learned he wasn't alone. Other drivers had stories, whispered ones about fog-shrouded stretches of Interstate 64 where something tall and black paced their rigs. One said his radio went dead the moment he saw movement in his mirrors. Another claimed a handprint the size of a dinner plate appeared on his rear door, smudged into the frost. None of them ever went public. But they watched the weather now. And whenever the fog rolled through those mountains, the CB channels went eerily quiet. Harold replaced his windshield, repaired the roof. He still drives, still takes the mountain routes when dispatch leaves him no choice. But when fog warnings hit his route planner, he detours, no matter how late it makes him. The photographs remain in his glove compartment, scratches, gouges, footprints. He doesn't show them to anyone anymore. Some nights, when he's parked at a lonely rest stop halfway between Beckley and Lewisburg, he swears he can feel a vibration in the air before the fog settles in. A low hum that isn't the truck engine, that seems to come from the forest itself. When it happens, he shuts off the lights, locks the doors, and waits in silence until the air clears. He tells himself it's just the mountains playing tricks. Just the wind in the hollows. But deep down, Harold Jameson knows better. On clear nights, when moonlight cuts across the ridges and the fog hasn't yet crept down from the peaks, he catches himself scanning the tree line. Sometimes, he imagines he sees something tall and still among the pines. Watching. Waiting. And when the first wisps of mist begin to snake across the road, he presses his foot down just a little harder on the accelerator because he knows that whatever follows men through those mountains doesn't need headlights to see, or roads to walk, or reason to hunt.